Commander Yuki stood at the viewing port of the transport ship as Galactic Council Station Omega-7 came into view. The massive structure looked like a metal flower blooming in space with its 8 arms reaching out in different directions. Each arm housed different alien species and their diplomatic teams. She had been to many stations before, but this one always made her feel small. Lieutenant Tejo walked up beside her carrying a datapad filled with mission briefings. He was young for his rank, but had proven himself reliable in the 3 years they had worked together. His black hair was cut short in regulation style, and his uniform was pressed perfectly as always. "The cultural exchange meeting starts in 2 hours, he said, looking at his notes. "The Vorthak Empire wants to discuss trade agreements and the Nexus. Collective is interested in our educational systems." Yuki nodded while watching the docking bay doors open to receive their ship. She had mixed feelings about these diplomatic missions. Humans were still new to the galactic community, and many species viewed them as curious children who had just learned to walk among the stars. It had only been 30 years since humanity achieved faster-than-light travel and joined the greater galactic civilization. Ensign Hana appeared from the communication station with a worried expression on her face. She was the youngest member of their team but had an excellent talent for understanding alien languages and customs. Her small hands clutched a translation device that beeped softly with incoming messages. "Commander, there are more species attending this meeting than we expected," she reported. "The Zephyrian Confederacy sent a representative, and even the Thorian Republic is sending someone. They usually avoid these smaller gatherings." This was unusual. Yuki had expected maybe 4 or 5 species, but it sounded like half the Galactic Council was coming to this cultural exchange. She wondered what had sparked such interest in human culture all of a sudden. The docking procedure took another hour, and soon they were walking through the station corridors. The artificial gravity felt slightly heavier than Earth normal, and the air had a metallic taste that reminded Yuki of old spacecraft. Aliens of various shapes and sizes moved through the halls going about their business. A tall, blue-skinned Vorthak approached them with the typical proud stride of his species. His forearms were held in a formal greeting position, and his large eyes focused on Yuki with what she had learned was respectful attention. The translator around his neck crackled to life as he spoke. "Commander Yuki, welcome to Station Omega-7. I am General Thexvar of the Vorthak Military Council. We are most eager to learn about human military traditions and capabilities." Yuki returned the formal greeting as best she could manage with only 2 arms. The Vorthak were known throughout the galaxy as excellent warriors who took great pride in their military history. They had been fighting wars for thousands of years and had developed sophisticated combat techniques. "Thank you, General. We look forward to sharing our experiences with your people." As they walked toward the meeting chambers, more aliens joined their group. A floating, crystal-like being introduced itself as Prime Scholar Yil Noth from the Nexus Collective. Its voice came from speakers embedded in its crystalline body and sounded like musical chimes. Behind it came several smaller crystal beings who Yuki assumed were students or assistants. The Zephyrian representative was a graceful creature that looked like a cross between a bird and a person. Its feathers shifted colors as it moved, and its large eyes never seemed to blink. It communicated through a combination of sounds and light patterns that the translation devices struggled to interpret perfectly. When they reached the main conference chamber, Yuki was surprised to see nearly 20 different species represented. The room was designed to accommodate various alien physiologies with different seating arrangements, gravity fields, and atmospheric zones. Humans were lucky that most species could tolerate similar environmental conditions. General Thexvar took his position at what appeared to be the head of the gathering. His booming voice filled the chamber as he addressed the assembled delegates. "Fellow sentients, we gather today to learn about our newest members of the galactic community. The humans have shown remarkable progress in their short time among the stars. We wish to understand their culture, their methods, and their capabilities." Prime Scholar Yilnoth floated forward with its crystalline body sparkling under the chamber lights. "Indeed, the human species presents fascinating questions about rapid technological development and social organization. We have studied their historical records, but direct observation of their methods would be most enlightening." Yuki felt slightly uncomfortable being the center of so much attention. She had given presentations before, but never to such a large and diverse group. Taiho leaned over and whispered that everything was going according to the mission briefing. "What specific aspects of human culture interest you most?" she asked the gathering. The Vorthak general spoke first. "Your military capabilities intrigue us. Our records show that humans have engaged in several conflicts since joining galactic society. The frontier wars against the automated defense systems were particularly noted. How does a species so new to space warfare achieve such results?" Yuki exchanged glances with Taiho. The frontier wars had been difficult, but she had not realized other species were paying such close attention to human military actions. The automated systems left behind by an extinct civilization had been a threat to several colonies, and the Terran Defense Force had been asked to deal with the problem. "We developed effective tactics through necessity," she replied. "When faced with challenges, we adapt and find solutions." The crystal being chimed in with what sounded like musical curiosity. "Our analysis of your combat reports suggests strategies and behaviors that do not match standard galactic military doctrine. We would be most interested in observing examples of these techniques." Other aliens began voicing similar requests. They wanted to see how humans fought, how they solved problems, and how they dealt with impossible situations. The enthusiasm was both flattering and slightly concerning. Hana stepped forward with her translation device ready. "We brought some footage from recent training exercises and combat operations. Would visual examples be helpful?" A wave of excited sounds and light patterns swept through the chamber. Every alien present seemed eager to witness human military capabilities in action. Yuki felt hesitant about showing combat footage to so many different species. Some of the battles had been brutal, and she was not sure how aliens would react to seeing human soldiers in life-or-death situations. But this was supposed to be a cultural exchange, and they had come prepared for such requests. "Very well," she said. "Lieutenant Taiho, please prepare the Battle of Kepler Station footage. That engagement shows standard human tactics against automated enemies." Taiho moved to the central display system and began loading the data files. The chamber lights dimmed, and a large holographic display activated in the center of the room. "This footage is from 6 months ago," Yuki explained to the assembled aliens. 200 of our soldiers were tasked with neutralizing a heavily defended automated station that was threatening civilian shipping lanes. She noticed that several aliens moved closer to get better views of the display. The Vorthak general leaned forward with obvious interest, and the crystalline beings began humming in harmonious tones. "Please understand that this was considered a routine operation by our standards," she added. "Our soldiers performed well, but this was not an exceptional battle by human measures." The footage began to play, and the chamber fell completely silent. On the display, human soldiers could be seen approaching a massive automated fortress bristling with weapon systems and defensive barriers. The odds looked impossible even to Yuki, who had read the after-action reports. She had no idea that what she considered a normal Tuesday was about to terrify every alien in the room. The holographic display showed the automated station in all its deadly glory. Massive weapon turrets tracked across empty space, while energy shields flickered around critical systems. The fortress had been built by a species that went extinct thousands of years ago, but their war machine still functioned perfectly. Lieutenant Jin Woo appeared on screen leading a squad of 20 soldiers toward the station. His calm voice came through the audio as he coordinated the approach with other teams. The aliens in the chamber leaned forward to catch every word as the human soldiers moved closer to what looked like certain Death Alpha team will take the eastern approach, Jin Woo said into his radio. Beta team goes west and Gamma team provides covering fire from distance. Remember, these machines learn from every attack, so keep changing your tactics. General Thexvar watched with growing amazement as the human soldiers spread out in patterns he had never seen before. They moved like liquid flowing around obstacles and threats instead of advancing in the rigid formations that most species used in combat. The first wave of defensive fire erupted from the station. Beams of energy that could cut through battleship armor lanced out toward the approaching humans. Any rational military force would have retreated immediately. But the humans did something impossible. They kept coming. Sergeant So Young rolled behind, cover as a plasma blast vaporized the ground where she had been standing. Instead of staying hidden, She immediately popped up and fired her weapon at a sensor array, then rolled to new cover before the automated guns could target her location. "Covering. So young now," shouted Private Minho as he sprinted across open ground, drawing fire away from his teammate. A beam weapon caught his left arm, but he kept running and used his momentum to throw a grenade with his good arm, before diving behind a piece of wreckage. The alien observers made sounds of shock and disbelief. No species they knew would continue, fighting after suffering such injuries. But Minho was already back on his feet. Coordinating with his squad commander, Yuki, provided commentary as the battle unfolded. Standard human doctrine emphasizes adaptability under pressure. Our soldiers are trained to use whatever resources are available, including damaged equipment and environmental hazards. On screen, the humans were doing exactly that. When their weapons were damaged, they picked up pieces of destroyed machinery and used them as clubs or shields. When the automated defenses adapted to their tactics, they immediately changed their approach. Technical analyst Kyung Min appeared in the footage coordinating the assault from a mobile command post. His voice remained steady, despite the chaos, as he directed different teams and analyzed enemy responses. "Station defense grid is learning our approach patterns," he reported calmly. "All teams switch to random movement protocols and begin phase 2 assault." The humans suddenly changed their entire strategy. Instead of trying to break through the defenses, they began using the station's own weapons against it. Corporal Jae Young climbed onto a disabled turret and somehow managed to redirect. Its fire toward other defensive systems. Prime Scholar Yilnoth made crystalline chiming sounds that indicated extreme confusion. Through its translator, it asked, "How does that human know how to operate alien technology that is 50,000 years old?" Yuki shrugged, as if it was obvious. "Jae Young has training in electronics and systems analysis. Our soldiers learn to improvise with unfamiliar equipment." What she did not mention was that Jae Young had figured out the alien control systems in less than 5 minutes while under heavy fire. To humans, this seemed like basic problem solving. But to the aliens, it looked like impossible intuition. The battle continued with the humans adapting to every new challenge. When the station activated gravity manipulation weapons that should have crushed the attacking force, the humans used the altered gravity to their advantage. They launched themselves off walls and used the gravitational fields to change direction in ways that confused the automated targeting systems. Captain Yu Jin led a team through a breach in the station hull. The corridor beyond was filled with deadly traps and guardian robots, but the humans moved through them like they were dancing. Every step seemed perfectly timed to avoid sensors and weapon systems. "How are they predicting the trap sequences?" asked the Zephyrian representative. Its feathers were shifting through rapid color changes that indicated extreme agitation. Lieutenant Tae-ho answered from beside the display controls. "Pattern recognition and situational awareness are emphasized in human training. Captain Yujin is reading the defensive layout and predicting likely responses." The aliens watched as Yujin somehow knew exactly where each trap would activate and guided her team safely through a maze that should have killed them all. She moved with confidence that suggested she could see the future. But Yuki knew it was just excellent tactical instincts. The assault reached its climax when the station activated its final defense protocol. A massive energy weapon began charging that would destroy everything within 50 kilometers. Most military forces would retreat immediately, but the humans did something that left every alien speechless. They ran toward it. Specialist Somin led a desperate charge directly at the main reactor. Energy blasts and projectile weapons filled the air around her team, but they kept advancing. When her weapon was destroyed, she picked up a piece of debris and used it to smash through a control panel, reactor core exposed. She shouted over the noise, "Need 30 seconds to plant charges." The entire human force suddenly changed their objective from destroying the station to protecting So-Min. They formed defensive positions and held their ground against impossible odds while she worked on the reactor. Several soldiers fell, but their teammates immediately filled the gaps. Private Dong-hyun was hit by 3 different weapon systems but continued providing cover fire until his ammunition ran out. Then he threw his empty weapon at a robot and tackled another one with his bare hands. His actions gave So-Min the time she needed. The footage showed the final explosion as the station's reactor overloaded. The humans had accomplished their mission and neutralized a threat that had been terrorizing the shipping lanes for months. Their casualties were surprisingly light, considering the odds they had faced, as the display shut down the conference chamber, remained completely silent. Every alien present stared at the space where the hologram had been with expressions of shock and disbelief. General Thexavar was the first to speak, and his voice carried a tone that Yuki had never heard from a Vorthak before. It sounded almost like fear. "Commander, that footage shows tactics and capabilities that should not be possible. No species achieves such results against those odds." The crystalline beings were humming in harmonious tones that their translators could not interpret. Prime Scholar Yilnoth floated closer to Yuki with its body sparkling in what appeared to be nervous energy. "The behavioral patterns we observed do not match any known military doctrine in our databases. Your soldiers displayed persistence levels that exceed biological limitations." Yuki felt confused by their reactions. The Battle of Kepler Station had been difficult, but not exceptional by human standards. The soldiers had performed well and completed their mission with acceptable losses. "I apologize if the footage was disturbing," she said. "Perhaps we should discuss less intense examples of human culture." But the aliens were not listening. They were exchanging rapid communications in their native languages, while their translators struggled to keep up. The chamber filled with sounds, clicks, chimes, and light patterns as different species tried to process what they had witnessed. Teho leaned over to Yuki and whispered, "Something is wrong. They look terrified, but I do not understand why." Hana was monitoring the alien communications with her translation equipment. Her face had gone pale as she listened to fragments of conversations. "Commander, they are talking about myths and legends," she reported quietly. "I keep hearing references to something called the Persistent Ones or Deathwalkers." Before Yuki could respond, General Thexvar stood and addressed the gathering in formal tones. "Fellow delegates, I believe we must adjourn this session immediately. There are matters that require urgent consultation with our respective governments." The aliens began filing out of the chamber with obvious haste. Many of them cast fearful glances back at the human delegation as they left. Within minutes, the humans found themselves alone in the conference room. Yuki looked at her team with growing concern. What had started as a simple cultural exchange had turned into something she did not understand. She had no idea that showing routine combat footage had just revealed humanity's true identity to a galaxy that thought their most dangerous myth was safely extinct. General Thexvar moved quickly through the corridors of Station Omega 7, with his forearms gesturing frantically as he spoke into his communication device. His blue skin had turned a darker shade which other Vorthaks would recognize as a sign of extreme agitation. "High Command, this is General Thexvar requesting immediate priority channel," he said in his native language. "We have a Code 7 situation that requires immediate attention from the War Council." The response came back within seconds. The voice on the other end carried the authority of someone who commanded entire fleets across Vorthak space. "General, this channel is reserved for existential threats to our civilization. What could possibly warrant such urgency?" Thexvar stopped walking and looked around to make sure no other species could overhear his conversation. Even through the translation devices, he did not want this information spreading before his government could respond appropriately. "High Command, I have just witnessed combat footage from the humans, the species we believe to be newcomers to galactic warfare. They are not what we thought they were." He spent the next 10 minutes describing the battle footage in detail. Every impossible tactical decision, every instance of soldiers continuing to fight after sustaining injuries that would kill most species, and the complete disregard for overwhelming odds. "General, are you certain this footage was authentic?" asked the High Command voice. "What you describe sounds like propaganda designed to intimidate potential enemies. I observed their biological responses during combat," Thexvar replied. Their heart rates, stress hormones, and brain activity were all within normal ranges while performing actions that should have caused psychological breakdown. They were not acting, High Command. This is how they naturally behave in combat situations. Meanwhile, in another section of the station, Prime Scholar Yilnoth had gathered with the other crystalline beings from the Nexus Collective. Their harmonic communication allowed them to share thoughts and analysis at speeds impossible for most biological species. The smaller crystal beings had been running calculations since the moment the human footage ended. Their collective processing power was analyzing every frame of the battle, looking for explanations that fit with known galactic military science. The tactical adaptations occur at rates beyond standard biological response times, sang one of the smaller crystals. Either these humans have enhanced neural processing or they possess intuitive understanding of combat that defies explanation. Yilnoth resonated with tones of deep concern. More troubling is their apparent familiarity with ancient automated systems. The human-designated J. Young interfaced with technology that predates their civilization by 50,000 years. The collective had access to the most complete databases in known space. They began searching through historical records looking for any reference to species with similar capabilities. Deep in the archives they found fragments of old myths and legends, stories passed down through dozens of civilizations about a species called the Persistent Ones. Beings who could not be stopped, who adapted to any challenge, and who viewed impossible odds as minor inconveniences. These cannot be the same species, chimed one of the crystals. The Persistent Ones were mythical, stories told to inspire courage in battle. But as they analyzed the footage more carefully, disturbing parallels emerged. The human soldiers displayed the same tactical flexibility, the same refusal to accept defeat, and the same ability to turn any situation to their advantage back in their assigned quarters. The human delegation was trying to understand what had happened. Dr. Beijin, the team's xenobiologist, was reviewing her notes about alien behavior patterns. I have never seen such a strong reaction from so many different species, she told Commander Yuki. The Vorthak are known for their military pride, but General Thexvar looked genuinely frightened. Captain Dong Hyun, who had arrived on the station that morning, was equally puzzled. He had been briefing other human officers about the cultural exchange when the alien delegates suddenly requested private meetings with their respective governments. Perhaps they were impressed by our tactical capabilities, he suggested. Many species have not seen human combat doctrine in action. Ensign Hana was monitoring alien communication frequencies with her equipment. Most of the traffic was encrypted, but she could pick up fragments of conversations in languages her translators could partially decode. I keep hearing the same phrases repeated, she reported. References to ancient myths and something about species that should be extinct. They seem to be searching through historical databases. Dr. Beijin frowned as she considered the implications. In her studies of galactic civilization, she had encountered references to various mythical species that supposedly existed in ancient times. There are legends common to many civilizations about warrior species that vanished long ago, she said thoughtfully. Most xenobiologists consider them cultural archetypes rather than historical fact. While the humans tried to understand the alien reaction, the various species representatives were having emergency communications with their home governments. The Zephyrian delegate had activated a quantum communication array to speak directly with the Confederacy Council. Its feathers were shifting through color patterns that indicated extreme urgency. Honored Council, I believe we have encountered a species from the ancient myths, it reported. The combat footage matches descriptions of the Deathwalkers from our earliest historical records. The response from the Confederacy was immediate and alarmed. Delegate, if your assessment is correct, then we face a situation not seen for 50,000 years. The Deathwalkers were not destroyed, they went into hiding. Similar conversations were taking place across the galaxy, as different species reached the same terrifying conclusion. The humans were not newcomers to galactic civilization. They were the return of the most feared warrior species in known history. In the deepest archives of the Galactic Library, ancient records began to surface. Files that had been sealed for millennia and marked as mythical rather than historical. Senior archivist Zixthul of the Nexus Collective had clearance to access these restricted databases. As the fragments of information came together, a picture emerged that changed everything they thought they knew about galactic history. The records spoke of a species that called themselves Terrans, who had been a major power 50,000 years ago. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. Instead, they served as protectors of galactic civilization. When existential threats arose that no other species could handle, the Terrans would appear. Rogue artificial intelligences that threatened to consume entire star systems would be shut down by small teams of Terran specialists. Reality-warping entities that drove other species insane would be contained by Terran soldiers who seemed immune to psychological attacks. The archives contained footage from those ancient times. Battles that looked remarkably similar to what they had just witnessed at the cultural exchange. The tactical patterns are identical, Zixthul reported to the emergency council session. These modern humans display the same combat instincts and problem-solving abilities as the ancient Terrans. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. The records indicated that the Terrans had not been destroyed or driven extinct as most species believed. They had voluntarily withdrawn from galactic civilization when a period of peace was achieved. The final entries suggested that they had modified their own memories and started over on a remote world to give the galaxy time to develop, without their influence. They were too dangerous to remain active during peacetime, read one ancient entry. The Terran Council voted to enter voluntary exile until such time as the galaxy again faced threats beyond the capability of normal species to handle. As this information spread among the alien delegates, panic began to set in. If the humans were really the returning Terrans then, their recent emergence from isolation might mean that new threats were coming. In their quarters, Commander Yuki was reviewing the mission reports when Tejo approached with a concerned expression. "Commander, I have been analyzing our own military records," he said quietly. "Some of our tactical successes in recent conflicts show patterns that do not match our training doctrines." He showed her data from several battles where human forces had achieved impossible victories. Situations where soldiers had displayed intuitive knowledge of alien technology or tactical solutions that seemed to come from nowhere. "It is as if our people know things they were never taught," Tejo observed. "Combat instincts that go beyond what our training should have provided." Yuki studied the data with growing unease. If their own military analysts were noticing unusual patterns, then perhaps the alien reaction was more justified than she had initially thought. She had no idea that across the galaxy emergency meetings were being called to discuss what to do about the return of their most dangerous myth made real. Senior archivist Zixthul floated through the restricted sections of the Galactic Archive, deep beneath the surface of the Nexus collective homeworld. The crystalline corridors here had not been accessed for thousands of years and contained the most sensitive historical records in known space. The emergency authorization from the High Council had granted him access to files marked as Level 9 classification. These were records so sensitive that most governments did not even acknowledge their existence. As he moved deeper into the archive, the lighting grew dimmer and the ancient storage crystals hummed with barely contained data. Most of these files had been sealed after the Great Peace was declared 50,000 years ago. "Archive system, activate historical search protocols," he commanded in the harmonic language of his species. Search parameters include Terran species, combat capabilities, and voluntary exile protocols. The massive crystalline matrix that stored the collective knowledge of 100 civilizations began to resonate. Data streams flowed through quantum channels as the archive searched through millennia of carefully preserved information. The first files to surface contained tactical analyses from ancient military observers, reports written by species that had witnessed Terran combat operations during the dark period before the Great Peace. Subject species displays unprecedented adaptability under combat stress, read one report from a Vorthak general who had served 50,000 years ago. Terran soldiers continue fighting effectively even after sustaining damage that would incapacitate any known biological form. Another file contained observations from a Zephyrian military scientist. The Terrans appeared to possess intuitive understanding of any technology they encounter. During the siege of Kethmaran Station, a single Terran specialist managed to reverse engineer and operate ancient Voidwalker weapon systems within minutes. Of first contact, Zixthul felt his crystalline matrix vibrating with growing alarm as he read these ancient accounts. The descriptions matched exactly what they had witnessed in the human combat footage, but the most disturbing files were yet to be discovered. Deep in the archive, he found sealed records from the Terran government itself, documents that had been left behind when they withdrew from galactic civilization. The Files revealed a truth that changed everything they thought they knew about human origins. The Terran hegemony has voted to implement the Restart Protocol, read the final official communication from their leadership. Our species has become too specialized for warfare and poses a long-term threat to galactic stability during peacetime. The document went on to describe a voluntary genetic modification program. The Terrans had used advanced biotechnology to suppress their own memories and capabilities before relocating to a remote world at the edge of the galaxy. Memory engrams will be reduced to baseline civilian levels. The report continued. Combat instincts will be suppressed through genetic modification, and our offspring will develop as a normal sapient species without knowledge of their heritage. But there was a failsafe built into the system. If existential threats to galactic civilization emerged, the genetic locks would begin to weaken, and the Terrans would gradually remember what they once were. Zixthol discovered technical specifications for this memory suppression system. The Terrans had been incredibly thorough in their planning. They had even modified their own planet to serve as a training ground that would gradually reawaken their dormant capabilities. Subject world designated as Earth has been seeded with controlled environmental pressures, read the technical documentation. Evolutionary stresses will maintain baseline survival capabilities while suppressing advanced tactical awareness. The world they had chosen was a death trap by galactic standards. Extreme weather patterns, dangerous predators, and constant environmental challenges that would force their descendants to develop problem-solving skills and persistence. Meanwhile, on Station Omega-7, the alien delegates were receiving reports from their respective home governments that confirmed their worst fears. General Thexvar had been summoned to an emergency briefing by the Vorthok High Command. The ancient archives of his species contained detailed military assessments of Terran capabilities from the old wars. General, the species you observed matches historical records of the Terran hegemony, his commander informed him. They were considered the most dangerous military force in galactic history. The briefing included footage from ancient battles that looked disturbingly similar to modern human combat operations. Terran soldiers displaying the same tactical flexibility, the same refusal to accept defeat, and the same ability to adapt to any challenge. High Command, what are our orders regarding this situation? Thexvar asked. Maintain diplomatic contact, but under no circumstances should they be treated as a potential enemy, came the reply. Historical records indicate that hostile actions against Terrans result in complete military defeat, regardless of numerical superiority. Similar conversations were taking place across the galaxy as species leaders realized what they were dealing with. On Station Omega-7, Commander Yuki was beginning to notice subtle changes in the behavior of her own people. Lieutenant Tae-ho had started analyzing tactical situations with insights that seemed to come from nowhere. During a routine review of station security, he had identified 17 potential vulnerabilities that the station's own security team had missed. When asked how he had spotted these issues, he could not provide a clear explanation. It just seemed obvious, he said with a confused expression. Like the patterns were visible once I knew where to look, Ensign Hana was displaying similar changes. Her translation abilities had improved dramatically, and she was picking up linguistic patterns in alien languages that should have taken years of study to master. Dr. Bei Jin was documenting these behavioral changes in her research notes. The modifications seemed to be triggered by exposure to stressful situations or complex problems. It is as if their brains are accessing capabilities that were always there but previously suppressed, she wrote in her private journal. The truth was even more significant than she realized. The genetic modifications that had suppressed Terran capabilities for 50,000 years were beginning to break down. Engineer Jae Sung, who appeared in the combat footage, was experiencing the most dramatic changes. Since the battle at Kepler Station, he had been able to understand alien technology with supernatural ease. When maintenance robots on the station malfunctioned, he had managed to reprogram them using principles he had never studied. The alien maintenance staff watched in amazement as he interfaced with systems that required decades of specialized training. "How do you know how to do that?" asked the Nexus Collective technician assigned to assist him. Jae Sung paused in his work and stared at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I do not know," he admitted. The knowledge just seems to be there when I need it. Pilot Yunji had experienced similar awakenings. During recent training exercises, she had demonstrated flight capabilities that exceeded anything in her service record. She could predict enemy movements and navigate through hazardous conditions with an accuracy that impressed even veteran pilots. Across human space, similar changes were being reported. Soldiers were displaying tactical insights they had never been taught. Engineers were solving problems with technologies they had never encountered. Scientists were making intuitive leaps that led to breakthrough discoveries. The restart protocol was failing exactly as the ancient Terrans had designed it to. Back in the Galactic Archive, Zixthul discovered the final piece of the puzzle, a sealed file that explained why the Terrans had chosen to return at this particular time. Long-range sensors have detected approaching entities from dark space, read the ancient warning. Probability analysis suggests 95% likelihood of existential threat to galactic civilization within 50,000 years. The Terrans had not just randomly chosen to exile themselves. They had calculated exactly when new threats would emerge and timed their return accordingly. As this information spread through the highest levels of galactic government, panic began to set in. If the Terrans were returning, it meant that something was coming that would require their intervention. Something so dangerous that the galaxy's most feared warrior species had programmed themselves to reawaken after 50,000 years of voluntary amnesia. The implications were staggering. Humanity's recent emergence from Earth was not random development. It was the activation of an ancient failsafe system. Commander Yuki and her team were still unaware of these revelations, but they were beginning to notice that something fundamental was changing. Their own capabilities were expanding in ways that defied explanation, and the aliens around them were treating them with a mixture of respect and barely concealed terror. They had no idea that they were witnessing the return of galactic civilization's greatest protectors, or that their presence meant unimaginable dangers were approaching from the darkness between stars. Supreme Chancellor Velkash of the Galactic Council stood before the emergency assembly in the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime. Representatives from every major civilization had gathered within hours of receiving the classified reports about human identity. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering designed to accommodate thousands of different species in a single space. Gravity fields, atmospheric zones, and environmental controls created perfect conditions for each delegation while allowing them to interact. But today, the usual diplomatic protocols had been abandoned. Fear and uncertainty filled the air as species that had not spoken to each other in centuries found themselves united by a common concern. Fellow delegates, Velkash began with his three voices harmonizing in the traditional manner of his people. We face a situation unprecedented in recorded galactic history. The species we believe to be newcomers to our civilization are in fact the return of the ancient Terran hegemony. A wave of sound swept through the chamber as thousands of beings expressed shock, alarm, and disbelief in their native languages. Even though most had received preliminary reports, the official confirmation still came as a devastating surprise. General Thexvar stood to address the assembly. His forearms gestured in the formal patterns of Vorthak military tradition as he spoke. Honored delegates, I have personally witnessed modern human combat capabilities. They match exactly the historical records of Terran military operations from 50,000 years ago. There can be no doubt about their identity. Prime Scholar Yilnoth floated forward with its crystalline body resonating with harmonic frequencies that indicated extreme urgency. Our analysis of ancient archives reveals that Terran withdrawal was not permanent exile but calculated intervention timing. Their return indicates approaching threats beyond normal species' capability to handle. The implications of this statement caused even more disruption in the chamber. If the Terrans had programmed themselves to return after 50,000 years, it meant they had foreseen dangers that were only now approaching. Senior archivist Zixthul presented the evidence his team had uncovered. Ancient files, sealed records, and most disturbing of all, the technical specifications for the restart protocol that had suppressed human memories and capabilities. The genetic locks are failing exactly as designed, he reported. Human individuals are recovering abilities and knowledge they never consciously possessed. Within months or possibly weeks, they will remember everything. Supreme Chancellor Velkash called for order as debates erupted throughout the chamber. Some species wanted to immediately welcome humanity as returning protectors. Others argued for containing this potential threat before it could fully awaken. The Thorian Republic delegates spoke through a translator that struggled with their complex chemical communication system. Historical records indicate Terran military superiority was absolute. No coalition of species ever successfully opposed them in direct conflict. If they choose to resume their former role as galactic hegemons, we would be powerless to resist. But the Zephyrian representative countered with its own concerns expressed in rapid color changes across its feathers. The alternative may be worse. Ancient records describe threats that required Terran intervention to prevent galactic extinction. If such dangers are returning, we need their protection regardless of the political implications. As the debate continued, emergency reports began arriving from observation stations at the galactic rim. Deep space sensors were detecting anomalous readings that matched descriptions from ancient warning systems. Unknown entities approaching from intergalactic void, reported the monitoring station. Energy signatures and movement patterns do not match any known phenomena. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Just as humanity was beginning to remember their true nature, new threats were emerging from the darkness between galaxies. On Station Omega-7, Commander Yuki and her team were finally being briefed on the truth. Supreme Chancellor Velkash had decided that the humans deserved to know their own history. Dr. Bajan listened in stunned silence as the ancient records were presented. The evidence was overwhelming and explained so many questions about human military capabilities. Our ancestors voluntarily suppressed their own memories, she said slowly. They turned themselves into ordinary civilians and started over on Earth. Lieutenant Tejo was studying the technical specifications for the restart protocol. His enhanced analytical capabilities were already helping him understand the complex biotechnology involved. The system was designed to activate gradually when specific threat conditions were detected, he observed. We are not just recovering memories, we are becoming what our species was always meant to be. Commander Yuki felt something stirring in her mind as she absorbed this information. Knowledge and instincts that had been dormant for 50,000 years were beginning to surface. She found herself analyzing the station's defensive capabilities and identifying tactical advantages she had never noticed before. The thought processes felt natural, like remembering something she had always known. Ensign Hana was experiencing similar changes. Her translation abilities had expanded beyond language to include tactical communications and technical protocols. She could understand alien military systems as easily as their spoken words. I can see the patterns now, she said with wonder in her voice. Not just in languages, but in how everything connects. Strategic patterns, political relationships, technological interdependencies. Across human space, similar awakenings were accelerating. Military commanders were developing tactical insights that revolutionized their understanding of warfare. Engineers were designing technologies that seemed impossible. Scientists were making discoveries that advanced human knowledge by centuries. Engineer Jae-sung had become so proficient with alien technology that other species were requesting his assistance with their own equipment. His ability to understand and modify any system he encountered was beyond what most civilizations considered possible. Pilot Gunji had been assigned to test new spacecraft designs and was consistently exceeding all performance expectations. She flew with an intuitive understanding of three-dimensional combat that made her nearly impossible to defeat. The changes were not limited to military personnel. Civilian humans were displaying enhanced problem-solving abilities, artistic creativity, and scientific insight that amazed alien observers. Back in the emergency assembly, the galactic delegates had reached a decision. They would reveal the truth to humanity and request their protection against the approaching threats. We have no choice, declared Supreme Chancellor Velkash. The ancient warnings were clear. When entities from dark space approach, only the Terrans possess capabilities necessary for galactic survival. General Thexvar supported this decision, despite his species' traditional pride in their own military. Abilities pride must yield to survival, he stated. The Vorthak Empire pledges full support to our returning protectors. Similar declarations came from species throughout the galaxy. Fear of human capabilities was outweighed by terror of facing unknown cosmic threats without their protection. When Commander Yuki received the formal request from the Galactic Council, she felt the final genetic locks in her mind releasing. 50,000 years of suppressed memories and capabilities flooded back into her consciousness. She remembered the great battles against reality-warping entities, the desperate struggles against machine intelligences that consumed entire star systems, the careful planning that had led to voluntary exile when galactic peace was achieved. "We accept the responsibility," she replied to the assembled delegates. "Humanity will resume our role as guardians of galactic civilization." But even as she spoke these words, Yuki could sense something stirring at the edge of known space. The same instincts that had once made humanity the galaxy's greatest protectors were warning her that unprecedented dangers were approaching. Long-range sensors were detecting massive energy signatures moving between galaxies, entities of such power that they made the ancient threats look trivial by comparison. The restart protocol had activated just in time. Humanity would need every recovered capability, every restored memory, and every awakened instinct to face what was coming. As reports continued arriving from the galactic rim, it became clear that the approaching entities were not just another threat to be contained. They represented a challenge that would test even fully awakened Terran capabilities to their limits. Commander Yuki stood at the viewing port of Station Omega 7, watching the stars and feeling the weight of galactic civilization resting on her species' shoulders once again. The galaxy's most dangerous myth had returned, and they would need to be more dangerous than ever before to protect the peaceful worlds they had once left behind. In the darkness between stars, ancient enemies were awakening, and the final test of Terran capabilities was about to begin.